Hello, and welcome back to the Features Talk podcast, where we are making vehicle technology simple and relevant for everyday drivers. I feel like I almost end up singing that part, but I'm really not trying to.
Alice, we're gonna make a song out of it at some point. We're
I
gonna
know,
have to.
right? Well, I am your host, Lisa Bailey, and as always, joining me is my co-host and our automotive product specialist, Luke Verseput. Welcome back, Luke.
Hello, everyone.
Whoop,
It's
whoop, whoop.
oh yeah, oh yeah. We got another next episode in the mini series happening. Um,
Right.
and yeah, we're set for now. We got the headphones, we got the mic, but and and this is what's interesting about this. I actually didn't think I was. I thought I was going to be a little late for this one because, to our dear listeners, Lisa doesn't know this yet. I had a big delay coming back from some errands because I drove right by the aftermath of a car accident on the freeway.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, that's
it was
that'll give you some pause.
it was down. It was 5 lanes went down to two. It was like heavy traffic, and I was like,
Oh
okay,
my
I'm gonna be getting back like a couple minutes before we're supposed to go live. I
oh
hope
my
I go.
goodness.
So it was clearly multi-car, but when it happened, but there was just one car being loaded onto a tow truck and debris just all over the freeway. And so I drove by and I thought, huh, okay. With that in mind, I'm gonna go
Let's
and
talk about
co-host a
that.
podcast about automotive safety. So
That's right.
let's uh let's 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 keep doing what Features First does and hopefully have less of that happening. So
Exactly.
so,
Exactly.
and in the continuation of our mini series here, we're in the middle of a kind of overarching subject of the learning curve that nobody talks about,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the learning curve of the technological advancement in cars and the safety features that are proliferating.
Yeah.
And so this one now is going to be about trusting those features,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we trust them, and how much it's too much?
Exactly.
At what point do you go from like, oh, I don't trust these features, I'm not going to use them, into being on board with them, to then thinking they can do all the work for you, which is not quite the world we live in yet.
Exactly. And with we opened up the mini series, like you said, talking about that knowledge gap. So
Mm-hmm.
we dove a little deeper into when you get the vehicle at the dealership and then when you leave. So we're almost going through this whole customer journey with the mini series where we're talking today about now when you leave the dealership and you
Yeah.
have the vehicle, right? And
Yep.
so we're talking about filling that gap now, and over reliance is a big part of that gap when you think
Yes.
about driver assistance systems. And it is the assumption that the technology will handle it. Really,
Mm-hmm.
it's the gradual shift, because you really don't know that this is happening. And I actually have experienced this myself, because I have driver assistance systems. Is where
Yeah.
it's a
Same.
shift, yeah, it's shift where you honestly don't even it's almost like you don't even know the system's there and working because you're so used to it. And so there's a shift from where you can even explain it, where you go from a driver to a passenger, and that has some very real consequences to that. And so when I think back in our season launch with Jason B. Johnson, we mapped out the progression of vehicle automation. And so we talked about
Yeah.
this. He talked about we are progressing from feet off to hands off to eyes off, and then
Yeah.
eventually mind off,
Uh-huh.
and gave the example of this is when you go to sleep in the car,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, this is like the progression of automation that we're seeing in front of us right now. And so it's helpful to see where the industry is headed, but in between the automation progression, shifts are happening with drivers.
Yeah.
And the discussion needs to happen around where they are, because right now, if we know and pay attention to the driver assisted systems and the marketing that's being used, we are at the hands off stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We are at the hands off stage with the driver assistance systems that are being offered, like Super Cruise and Blue Cruise. Luke, you've talked about these plenty of times in our episodes. And
Yeah. And
some
autopilot to an extent as well.
Correct, correct. And so building that trust for the driver happens over time with awareness, but it also can I would say, open an opportunity for you to become over reliant on the technology. And
Yeah.
so there is a knowledge gap right there that this particular episode is going to be all about today. And so we're going to do it just like we do all of our other episodes, with starting with some basic terms. And the first term that we can start with is over reliance.
Yeah.
And
That one right
so
there.
exactly. And that is a documented pattern. So this is a real term. Okay. It is a documented pattern of drivers placing excessive trust in driver assistance technologies beyond its designed capabilities. That is the key thing right here. Beyond its design capabilities. And it often is resulting in reduced attention, reduced engagement, and response readiness behind the wheel. So let me just sit back and relax.
Yeah. Let me just, well, yeah, oh, the car will just do everything by itself. Well, no, it won't.
Yeah.
And I've alluded to this in the past. It's not our place, at least right now, to go into depth about this. But as a result of some dishonest marketing, maybe
Yeah.
less than perfectly honest marketing in the past, on the part of some automakers, some people have become, over reliant on these systems, because, and it's what you said there, Lisa, is an important distinction, that the excessive trust happens beyond its designed capabilities, because it is designed to do, some things, right? It's yes, it's good to trust that it can do that, but beyond that, that's when that's getting into the area where, well, now it's on us, because it's not a full self-driving car. And
Correct.
that's like what we talked about with Jason in mapping out this whole roadmap of how automated driving will happen.
Yeah.
We're currently in there's like the umbrella term you could use for where we are right now is partial automation.
Correct.
And that's another big thing we want to make sure is clear with what we're talking about here with this, how much trust is too much trust in safety systems, in ADAS features. Partial automation is where we're at. So it can automate, certain cars can automate certain things, but not all of it. And so partial automation means level 2. We've talked in past episodes about different levels of ADAS capability. We're currently at level 2. And so level 2 systems are where the vehicle handles both steering and speed simultaneously. And this is something that a lot of our listeners with newer cars of the past few years have undoubtedly seen and likely experienced. Adaptive cruise control, so it does the speeding up and slowing down for you, and partial self-steering. Not 100% of the time, but partial self-steering. Enough to maybe guide you through one freeway corner, maybe, or freeway curve, I should say. But then it's not going to keep going there for you indefinitely. And so drivers have to remain engaged and alert at all times. With partial automation, which is where we're at.
Which is where we are at. I want to say it again. That is where we are at. I mean, that is so important when we're talking about the gap. The gap, how do you fill the gap? Filling the gap is knowing where we are. We are at level 2. So the idea that you have a self-driving vehicle is not even where we are with the level of automation that is available.
That's correct.
You know what I'm on? So it's like,
and that's why I started by saying this is where we're at right now. We talked before about the roadmap of where it's expected to go and what's being worked on. That's it at a macro level, like macro. What we're doing now with this miniseries, we're bringing down to that micro level of the consumer, the car purchase, the usage of that one car. And so where we're at right now is partial automation.
Yes. And I love that you said that. Another term that we're going to talk about in this episode is automation complacency. So I talked about this earlier, something that I have experienced and have heard many of other stories. And it is that gradual reduction in driver vigilance. So, that occurs when the system performs reliably over time. So now, great, the systems are performing. We've got blind spot monitoring working. We've got lane centering and lane keeping assist helping you as well. And so it causes the driver to disengage mentally So
Mhm.
you're still physically there, but maybe you feel that you can start doing different tasks now. Maybe I'm picking up the phone, or maybe I'm checking, I don't know, grabbing something from the glove
Yeah.
box. It can be things,
Yeah.
but that
Or reaching
the
behind to the back
system.
seat. You know, like
Mhm.
reaching behind to the back seat, doing one of those.
Exactly. The system consistently performing over time can cause you to disengage.
Become
And
complacent.
and be physically present. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that and how to not necessarily avoid it, but notice when it's happening. And then
Right.
what can you do, right? Because it's not about avoiding it. It's going to happen.
Exactly. It's kind of inevitable that it will. People, humans as the, animals that we are, we fall into what do we get used to and what can we just kind of take for granted. And when that happens, and then yeah, and the other thing is we're partially trained as well, largely as a result of of modern automotive marketing to be to become complacent with some of these
Right.
features, because one of the marketing terms that is thrown around a lot and that we touch on today and have touched on a bunch in the past, but we'll again touch on this time, is hands-free driving.
Yes.
Let me rephrase: hands-free driving. Um,
Yes.
that
Yes.
hands-free driving, and this is a common marketing term that gets thrown around for level two ADAS features,
Mhm.
that it does allow for certain segments of driving for the car to follow, the trajectory of a lane by
Mhm.
itself with hands
Mhm.
off. and this is becoming more and more common that cars can do
Oh,
this,
yeah.
partially. But the thing is, hands-free driving being used as the marketing term is somewhat misleading, because that clicks in a lot of people's minds, autonomy, fully
Yes.
autonomous, and it's not. That's the thing we want to drive home. Hands-free driving, if you hear that marketed, that does not mean a fully autonomous vehicle. It doesn't mean
Right.
you're no longer responsible, and that doesn't make it okay to open the door for complacency on that, like you just mentioned.
Correct. And the biggest thing that I have just found in trying to demyth and debunk the hands-free driving, you know, reputation that comes with it is going back to what we originally said. If you believe beyond the system's capabilities, we have a problem. And
You're right.
so, yes, it is hands-free for probably a certain amount of seconds, but it's not giving you any of that detail. So when you see hands-free, you just like, oh, well, I can drive hands-free. It's autonomous. I have an autonomous vehicle. And so
Hmm.
you're absolutely right. And one of the organizations that we are going to talk about in this episode, as well as the National Transportation Safety Board.
Yeah, the
Okay. So
NTSB.
correct. This is the independent federal agency who is responsible for investigating transportation accidents and issuing safety recommendations. Okay. So that is very important because you can do your own research on what the NTSB has discovered. And we're actually going to get into a case study about that today. But the
Mm,
terms hands free is one of the most common phrases in level two marketing, like you said, but it's
yeah,
also one of the most misunderstood. And
yeah,
again, our episode with Jason B. Johnson, we talked about the automation progression. Hands free is a marketing language built on the hands off stage. So
right.
hands off, which is the automation progression, right? But it doesn't tell you what's still required for you as the driver. And
Hmm.
that's the part that's really important, that as drivers, consumers, and even fleet who are purchasing the vehicles and are in charge of training, the level of training that you need to put into helping those drivers understand their responsibility. It's that in between that keeps getting lost, and that space in between a feature is called and what a feature actually does, right?
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
Luke, hands free is the phrase customers walk in already knowing, right? I'm pretty sure, usually from an ad, and not from us. But at the
Hmm.
point of sale, when a customer hears hands free and asks about it, just like from your experience as a product specialist, what are they
Hmm.
actually picturing the car will do?
Yeah. Some people will describe exactly what they're talking about,
Mhm.
or what they are asking about. So will this car be able to go from here to here without, without this? Some people actually say, can it do this specific things? Other people, they just hit you with the really, just the kind of, I don't want to say generic, but just kind of the question of,
Yeah.
does it drive itself?
Right.
And most consumers, I think most people that I've talked to, when they say, does it drive itself, they do seem, I get the sense that they know it's not 100% self-driving car where you
Right.
can tell it to just wake me up when we get there.
Mhm.
When people say, does it drive itself, they're not usually expecting that. I don't think anyone really was realistically expecting that from most cars. But when they say, when people ask about hands-free, it happens all the time. What they are usually picturing is, this is usually just on the freeway.
Mhm.
There are a lot more variables in stop and go street traffic with red lights and green lights and traffic intersections and so on. So generally, this, the level 2 partial automation happens mostly on freeways where it's you can maintain a more consistent speed.
Mhm.
And what they're usually talking about is the ability to be able to be hands-free off the steering wheel for more than maybe a couple seconds at a time.
Mm.
There's no one exact hard fast rule for any car with this feature
Right.
has this exact amount of time and then it
Right.
has to remind you. um I've been and like, even on my car it varies.
Mhm.
In I have a vehicle with adaptive cruise control and
Mhm.
a lane following. Its feature is called lane follow assist.
Mhm.
But essentially a partial self-steering system. Partial.
Yes.
Partial, in case you didn't hear me.
Say that
um,
for the people in the
for
back,
the people in the
Luke.
back, partial, right? um, but I've been in stop and go traffic, and I was on the phone with someone one time, and of course I'm feet off because it's doing
Yeah.
its acceleration deceleration, and this is like slow stop and go traffic. And I was hands off the steering wheel for about 14 minutes, and it
Mhm.
didn't breathe a word about it.
Wow.
um, and I know it was that because I was on the phone with someone, and when you're on the phone it shows how long the call's been going on.
Yes.
I
Yes.
It was like 13 and a half, 14 minutes, and I had not touched the steering wheel during the whole phone call,
Mm.
and it didn't breathe a word about it.
Mm.
But then there have been other times when, if you're I've been going at a more consistent speed of 60 to 70-ish or so, then maybe it's sometimes it'll let me know after 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And so that car seems to, its logic of when to remind the driver seems to be the driving and road conditions. It's taking that into account. Like, is it having to do too much correction on its own? Needs driver intervention. Most people are talking about that level
Yeah.
of can this car get past that couple seconds of hands free to where
Mhm.
it's like, well, why bother having it if it's just going to remind me a couple seconds later?
Hmm. I find that very interesting because you brought something up that was actually found in one of the studies we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
And it specifically they talked about the driver's side and what happened in the investigation, but they also talked about how the driver monitoring system, was ineffective at detecting the driver distraction or
Oh,
disengagement. So it
okay.
allowed off-road glances to go undetected.
Hmm.
And so that is very important. Matter of fact, let's just transition right into that. I'm specifically talking about the in March of 2026, the NTSB concluded its investigation into two fatal crashes that happened in 2024, and it
Mhm.
involved Ford's Blue Cruise system.
Hmm.
Okay. And so it was covering a rear end crashes that happened in San Antonio and Philadelphia. And what happened is the Ford's SUV struck stationary vehicles at highway speeds while operating in the hands-free partial automation system.
Wow. Yeah. So like traffic stopped on the freeway and then just whack.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was very interesting because what was concluded was that so it was two things. The driver's over reliance on the automated system contributed to the crashes, But it was also that the driver monitoring system was ineffective at detecting driver distraction. So when you said you went 13
Mhm.
minutes, I'm like, wow. I'm thinking about the episodes that we did on the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard, so FMVSS 127, and then we talked about Euro NCAP, and how we are
Mhm.
talking about stricter guidelines now. So they are
Yeah.
holding these technologies to a very strenuous standard when it comes to detecting distracted driving and even glancing away. And so the systems are going to start improving. And if you weren't able to tune into the episode on both of those episodes that we talked about, that go back and listen to that, because
Mhm.
they, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the government, especially when they're looking at the crash data, they're looking at the performance of the technology, but they're also looking at the driver. So over
Yeah.
reliance is at play, but then there's also the technology and the functionality that was at play in this particular study, which I found very interesting. So when you said that, I was like, wow, there these are those growing pains in between the system. And if you don't know the limitations of the system and you are over reliant on it, what happens?
Yeah. Well, worst case scenario, that.
This is what
So,
happens.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's what makes filling this gap and understanding about the over reliance trap, that, this is something that happens to all of us. If once you start to engage with driver assistance systems, at level 2 automation, which is what we're talking about, you have to be vigilant behind the wheel. You
Oh
have to
yeah.
be paying attention behind the wheel. You have to know the limitations of the systems and be aware that you can become over reliant, and paying attention to that, being intentional behind the wheel when you're deciding to, just lean back and be a little bit less engaged and maybe more distracted.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever I talk to anyone, especially if it's customers or if I'm talking to people outside of work or whatever, anytime I talk about those kinds of features, it goes back to what we mentioned about how important the um, the distinction is of us currently being in a world of partial automation.
Correct.
That none of these features are there to just do everything for you all the time. And like I said, the only when I in the case of me, the only reason my car went that long without um, telling me to put my hands on the wheel was because it was like creeping along at 5 miles an hour, stopping,
Right. Right.
creeping along at 5 miles an hour and stopping.
Mhm.
And like we're surrounded by stationary cars.
Mhm. Mhm.
So but then and I've described some of my experiences with my own car before. When I'm going on the freeway, I think they'll like at a consistent speed. The longest I've ever had it go before telling me put hands on the wheel has
Yeah.
been maybe like a minute at most.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
so I feel confident that okay, the safety systems in that car are,
Mhm.
strict enough that it's not letting me go too long because my car doesn't have any kind of camera watching me. It doesn't have
Right.
that system. So but yeah, in the case of Blue Cruise, I have brought that up and I've brought up General Motors Super Cruise before.
Mhm.
Similar systems that actually have cameras that monitor the driver and
Mhm.
can actually do eye tracking to see are they looking ahead and are they doing occasional glances left and right to look in mirrors, which is obviously good to do.
Right.
But but yeah, it's interesting that the NTSB's investigation concluded that there was shortcomings on both sides, and
Yes.
we've said before no one side can shoulder the entire thing.
Correct.
In order for all of this to work in harmony, right, and all for it to work properly, it takes both the driver being safe, but also the technology being held to a high enough standard.
Correct.
And
Correct.
it takes both
Yes.
sides of that equation have to hold it up. And it's interesting that we mentioned that because one of our listeners actually wrote in with a question about that something similar to that. We've been fortunate with our Features Talk podcast to have a lot of questions and feedback coming from
Mhm.
our listeners. So we had decided a while back to dedicate a segment called Listener Lane because we like to have this be engaging with the community.
Yeah.
And so one of our listeners wrote in and said, when I first got my car, I was hyper aware of what features like lane assist were doing. Now I barely even notice it's on. Now I barely notice it's on. At what point does that become a problem?
Yeah.
And so that was that. I liked seeing that question because I what came to mind for me was, and the question didn't specify this, but I read that as both, a person using their own car, but I read that as a parent maybe asking like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, like for a teen, it's like the joke people often use, like they ask a weird question, they're like, oh, asking for a friend, you know,
Yeah.
people like to say that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh,
But
oh,
sometimes it's for them.
yeah, safety features about a car, asking for a teen, right? So, but I mean, I bring up the joke, but like I also interpret it as that. So again, they didn't specify if that was their case, but at what point does it become a problem to just kind of know that those features are doing their thing, just like I don't know, just like putting on your turn signal
Yeah.
makes the light blink, right? Like, we just can take for granted that it's there. I would say it only becomes a problem when it's putting other drivers in danger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what it is, because it's never just you on the road.
Right.
It's never just you. And the safety features that we talk about, we always talk about how they impact the person using them, but they equally impact the other people
Mm-hmm.
on the road. When those fatal accidents happened, uh, it wasn't only the person who lost their life that had a bad day,
That's right.
right? There was like, it always involves someone else when something goes wrong.
Yep.
And so I would say, and this can also, nuances of this answer could vary by individual safety features, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say in general, it becomes a problem when, if the feature were not there, that you would no longer be able to replicate that safe drive.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it would start affecting others. If right this minute, because we both have cars with similar safety, with some differences, we have cars with similar safety features. If right this minute, if the next time you drive, you were told that your car has no more automatic emergency braking,
Mm-hmm.
right? That it's just not that it's going to malfunction, that it's just not there. And so
Right.
if you're not paying attention, your car will just plow right into the front of whatever's in front of you if you're not paying attention. Would
Mm-hmm.
you still be able to drive just as effectively as if that car could stop itself?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now that is obviously a more extreme example of like what happened with that investigation.
Yeah.
But the most common one, I think, is lane keep assist.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
it's honestly, it's even more common than blind spot monitoring, because
Mm-hmm.
blind
Mm-hmm.
spot monitoring happens only when you change lanes. But what
Right.
about when you're just going forward in your lane?
Yep.
Um, and I am I would say, I guess, a partial admission of guilt here is that in sometimes when I drive, because my parents have an older car, an old 2014 Tacoma.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a work truck through and through. Forget advanced
There, right.
ADAS feature. First of all, 2014. Second of all, Tacoma.
Yep.
you
Yep.
know,
Work truck.
exactly. One
Yep.
of the best cars in human history at
Right.
what it does, but
That's right.
not really the testing ground for the latest and hottest tech in the car world. That's never been
Right.
the point.
Right.
So forget advanced ADAS features in that car, like what we just talked about. And there have been times when I drive that car, because I drive that one on occasion, and when I'm driving on the freeway, I sometimes feel myself
Oh yeah.
oh, I'm a little late to not change lanes, but when the freeway starts to curve, like, oh, I'm a little bit late to start turning there, because I just know I've gotten so used to the fact that even though I personally always drive with hands on the wheel,
Yeah.
my current car does start to go through that turn on its own.
Mm-hmm.
It does a kind of lane guidance. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I'm suddenly in a car that doesn't do that, I'm like, oh wait, gosh, I have to, you feel a difference. And I would say that's when it becomes a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
And again, I wasn't close to like getting in an accident when this happened, but again, I just to say, like, it's happens to me too, happens to all of
Yep.
us.
Yep.
It becomes a problem if you would not be able to replicate that safe drive, and if it starts endangering others.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love what you said because it really brings it back to the purpose and the why behind everything. It's just not you. There are so
Mhm.
many others around you that will be affected by it. But to me, listening to you, Luke, and what you were saying, it really sounds like the real question is what actually happens and how do you help yourself when you catch it before it becomes a problem.
Mhm.
So you mentioned when you go into a car with less ADAS, which has happened to me plenty of times, where I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I forgot the blind spot monitoring is not here, the lane centering assist is not here, and I have to be. I notice myself, okay, be a little bit more vigilant, and even just that little small conversation should be a no. That
Right.
should be a note. And so just like we do, well, I don't know if everybody does this, but digital detoxes and time away from screen time and this and that,
Mhm.
you have to probably do that when it comes to your vehicle that has a bunch of driver assistance systems. Maybe sometimes you get in a car that doesn't have one, or
Yeah.
maybe, maybe you start to switch it up just to test your vigilance behind the wheel with and without it. I think is a really good way to just wrap up what you said, because I love what you said, and also know that it's also how the system is communicating with you. So there's also
Mhm.
things that the system has to be held at the standard that we talked about, and level 2 systems and regulations there and standards are just now being addressed.
Mhm.
And that's really mind-blowing to me because level 2 ADAS is really touching millions of drivers. Autonomous vehicles are not touching millions of drivers yet, but
Right.
level 2 is. And so the standards are now just catching up to this. So even the federal standards on performance is being evaluated and updated too. So there's a multiple things that's going on. So don't think it's just you and something that you can fix, but do catch it, and be vigilant, behind the wheel. And so over reliance is not a character flaw. Trust builds with repeated exposure. And so this happens across most drivers who are using level 2 systems over time. That is the reason why we wanted to have this episode to bridge this gap. It's one of the most consistently replicated findings in this space. Okay. So understanding where the system ends and your responsibility begins is not optional, it's the whole point. It's
Mhm.
entire point. Okay. And so, next episode, we are flipping the script. Okay.
Mm.
And we are going to be talking about the opposite problem, which is just as dangerous. It's the driver who turns all the features off. So, we've got
Yeah.
the features, and now let's just go ahead and disable them. And so, if this episode gave you, like I said, even one, wait a minute, I didn't even know that moment, or, oh, I feel a little bit better, do us a favor, hit subscribe, leave us a rating, and share this with someone who you know it will be valuable to, a parent of a teen. And until next time, we will see you in episode 2, and drive safely.
Drive safely, everyone.
Bye, guys.